The chains were cold against her wrists. Captain Jai Marin knelt on the smooth black floor of the Vraxine Judicial Station and kept her breathing steady. Around her, 11 members of her crew knelt in a line, their heads forced down by the weight of magnetic collars locked around their necks. The room was enormous. It stretched upward into darkness, lit only by pale blue lights that floated in the air like dying stars. Hundreds of Vraxine officials sat in rows above them, their insect-like bodies clicking and shifting as they watched the prisoners below. Jai had been a freighter captain for 9 years. She had hauled cargo across 12 star systems, survived engine failures, pirate attacks, and one very bad divorce. She had never expected to end up here kneeling before an alien court in a part of space that hadn't even been Vraxine territory 6 months ago. It had happened fast. Her ship, the Driftwood, had been passing through the Kalara corridor on a routine supply run when the Vraxine patrol fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right on top of them. No warning, no communication, just a wall of dark warships and a boarding party that tore through the Driftwood's hull like it was made of wet paper. The Vraxine had recently annexed the entire corridor. Nobody had told the humans. Now here she was, a criminal apparently. The adjudicator entered from above. Vorelzith was his name. Jai had heard it whispered by one of the guards. He descended on a floating platform, his long body folding and unfolding as he moved. He was tall, maybe 9 feet, with a narrow head covered in dark plates and 4 arms that ended in clawed fingers. His eyes were black and wet, like pools of oil. When he spoke, his voice came out in clicks and hisses that the translation device in Jai's collar turned into flat, emotionless English. The accused are charged with illegal passage through sovereign Vraxine space, Vorelzith said. The penalty for this crime, under Dominion law, is death. Jai heard one of her crew, young Tors, the navigation officer, let out a small sound, a whimper. She wanted to reach over and squeeze his hand, but the chains held her in place. Vorelzith continued. He talked about the greatness of the Vraxine Dominion. He talked about how they had brought order to over 300 species across 4 spiral arms of the galaxy. He talked about how the Dominion dealt with those who broke their laws. Jai had heard speeches like this before. Every bully in the galaxy sounded the same. They just used different words. Then Vorelzith said something that made the room go quiet. The humans will face the crucible. A wave of clicking sounds rippled through the officials above. Even the guards shifted. Jai did not know what the crucible was, but she could feel the weight of the word in the room. It meant something terrible. One of the other prisoners, a Tessani trader with soft gray skin and enormous, frightened eyes, began to cry. The sound was wet and broken, like a child lost in the dark. Another prisoner, an Uruk male with thick arms and a heavy brow, simply closed his eyes and went still, as if he had already decided to die. Jai looked at her crew. Their faces told her everything. Some of them had heard of the crucible. Tors was shaking. Dr. Akafer, the ship's medic, had gone pale. Even Briggs, the toughest person Jai had ever met, was staring at the floor with wide eyes. A guard leaned close and explained it in a bored voice, as if describing the weather. The crucible was the Vraxine method of public execution for what they called primitive species. The condemned were placed in a massive arena and forced to face creatures, predators collected from the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. There were no weapons given, no armor. The entire event was broadcast live to billions of viewers across the Dominion. It was entertainment. It was a warning. It was a reminder to every conquered species of what happened when you stepped out of line. 4,000 years. That was how long the Vraxine had been running the crucible. In all that time, no condemned prisoner had ever survived. Vorelzith was watching her. Jai could feel those black, wet eyes on her face. He was waiting for her to break. He wanted her to cry, to beg, to scream. That was part of the show, the fear before the death. Jai lifted her head and met his gaze. "What kind of beasts?" she asked. Her voice was steady, almost casual, like she was asking about the weather. The room went silent. Then slowly, a sound began to build, a clicking, rattling noise that Jai realized was laughter. The Vraxian officials were laughing. Even Vorlzith made a sound that might have been amusement, his mandibles spreading wide. "For you," Vorlzith said, "I will select the Gorath." More clicking, more laughter. But underneath it, Jai noticed something. A few of the officials had stopped laughing. They exchanged glances. One of them leaned forward and spoke rapidly to Vorlzith in their own language, too fast for the translator to catch. Vorlzith waved him away with one of his 4 arms. Jai did not know what a Gorath was, but she could read a room. Whatever it was bad, maybe the worst thing in their collection. Good. She had grown up on Earth. She had grown up learning about the animals that had shared her planet, animals that had been trying to kill humans for 200,000 years. Saber-toothed cats, cave bears, wolves, crocodiles, sharks. Humans had faced all of them with sticks and stones and stubborn, stupid courage, and humans were still here. The cats were not. Jai looked at her crew. They were watching her, searching her face for some sign of hope, some reason not to fall apart. She could not promise them safety. She could not promise them survival. But she could give them something the Vraxian did not understand and could not take away. She could give them the truth about what they were. "Trust me," she whispered, low enough that only her crew could hear. "Humans have done this before." Tor stared at her. Then slowly he straightened his back. Briggs unclenched her jaw. Dr. Akefer took a long, slow breath and nodded. The guards came to drag them away. As they pulled Jai to her feet, she took one last look at Vorlzith sitting on his floating platform above the court. He looked satisfied. He looked like a creature who had already won. Jai had seen that look before. She had seen it on the faces of every person who had ever underestimated her. Every boss who had told her she was too small to captain a ship. Every customs officer who had assumed she would fold under pressure. Every pirate who had thought a freighter crew would not fight back. They were all wrong. As the guards marched her down the dark corridor toward the holding cells, Jai began to plan. She did not know what a Gorath looked like. She did not know how big it was, how fast it moved, or how it killed. But she knew one thing that Vorlzith did not. She knew what humans were capable of when they had nothing left to lose. The cell door closed behind her with a heavy sound. In the darkness, Jai sat down, closed her eyes, and began to think. The arena was bigger than anything Jai had ever seen. It sat on the surface of a Vraxian colony world called Dalvoris, carved into the ground like a wound in the earth. The walls rose hundreds of feet high, lined with seats that held over 1,000,000 spectators. The air was hot, thick with dust, and the smell of something sharp and metallic that Jai realized was old blood soaked into the sand beneath her bare feet. They had taken everything. Boots, belts, tools, anything that could be used as a weapon or shield. Jai and her 10 surviving crew members stood in thin prisoner tunics, barefoot on red sand, blinking in the harsh white light that poured down from floating lamps above the arena floor. The crowd was already screaming. Jai had spent 3 days in the holding cells. She had used every minute. She had talked to the other prisoners, the Tessani traders, the Uruk refugees, and learned everything they knew about the Crucible. She had asked about past events, about the beasts, about the arena itself. Most of them had been too frightened to say much. But one old Tessani male, a trader named Suvan who had watched Crucible broadcasts for decades, had given her something useful. "The Gorath is not stupid," Suvan had said, his gray fingers trembling. "It hunts with its eyes first. It watches how prey moves. It finds the weakest one and kills that one first to scatter the rest. Then it picks them off, one by one." Jai had nodded. She knew animals like that. Lions did the same thing on the African plains. So did wolves. "What else?" she had asked. "It is armored. The plates on its body can stop a blade. But underneath, between the joints, the second set of arms, where they meet the body, the skin is thinner there. Softer. That is where the organs are closest to the surface." That was all she needed. Now she stood in the arena, the crowd roaring above her, and she looked at her crew. They were terrified. She could see it in the way Tors kept swallowing, in the way Briggs clenched and unclenched her fists, in the way Dr. Ockhaffer's hands shook at her sides. But they were standing. They were looking at her, waiting. Jai had spent the last 3 nights teaching them everything she could remember about hunting, about pack tactics, about how ancient humans had brought down animals 10 times their size with nothing but coordination, noise, and the willingness to take a hit. She had drawn diagrams in the dust of the cell floor. She had made them practice formations. She had drilled into them one simple idea: the beast expected prey. It did not expect a team. "Remember what I told you," Jai said. "Stay wide, stay loud, do not bunch up. When it charges, you scatter and regroup. Watch its head, it will turn toward whoever it wants to kill next. Call it out, warn each other." "And the soft spot?" Briggs asked. Her voice was rough but steady. "Leave that to me," Jai said. A deep horn sounded. The ground shook. At the far end of the arena, a massive gate began to rise, and from the darkness behind it came a sound that Jai felt in her chest before she heard it with her ears. A growl. Low, rumbling, ancient. The sound of something that had never once in its life been afraid. The Gorath stepped into the light. It was worse than she had imagined. It stood 12 feet tall on 6 thick legs, its body covered in overlapping plates of dark bone that looked like cracked stone. Its head was broad and flat, with a jaw that split into 4 sections lined with teeth the length of her forearm. 2 smaller arms sat tucked against its upper body, ending in hooked claws. Along its spine, rows of dark spines glistened with something wet. Venom, Suvan had warned her. One scratch from those spines, and your muscles would lock up within seconds. The crowd exploded with noise. The Gorath lifted its head and roared, and the sound hit Jai like a physical force. Behind her, she heard someone stumble. She did not turn around. "Spread out," she shouted, "now." Her crew moved. They fanned out across the sand in a wide half-circle just as she had taught them. The Gorath's head swiveled, tracking the movement. Its black eyes flicked from one human to another, calculating, choosing. It charged. It went for Tors. Of course it did. He was the smallest, the youngest, the one whose fear was most visible. The beast moved with horrifying speed for something so large, its 6 legs driving it across the sand like a freight train. "Tors, break left," Jai screamed. "Briggs, noise, everyone else noise." Tors dove left. Briggs grabbed a handful of sand and hurled it at the Gorath's face, screaming at the top of her lungs. The others did the same, shouting, stamping, throwing anything they could grab. The Gorath hesitated. Its head snapped toward Briggs, then back to Tors, then toward the shouting figures on its other side. It was confused. It had never faced prey that fought back like this. Prey was supposed to run. Prey was supposed to scatter and hide. These creatures were doing something else entirely. Jai circled behind it. She moved fast and low, watching the beast's body as it turned and snapped at her crew. She could see the spot Suvan had described, a gap between the armored plates where the second set of arms joined the torso. The skin there was darker, softer looking. She could see it pulse with each breath the creature took. The Gorath caught Kofi. It happened in a single, terrible second. Kofi, the ship's engineer, stumbled in the sand. The beast's head whipped around, and one massive forelimb came down like a hammer. Jai heard the impact. She heard the sound Kofi made. Then silence from that part of the arena. Something cracked inside her. Not broke, cracked. Like a door opening to something deeper, something older. A rage so pure it burned away every trace of fear in her body. "Keep moving," she roared. Her voice did not sound like her own. It sounded like something from a long time ago, from deep forests and dark caves, from the first humans who had stood their ground against things with claws and teeth and had refused to die. The Gorath killed Riina next. The ship's quartermaster went down trying to pull Kofi's body out of the way. The beast's venomous spines caught her across the shoulder, and she locked up mid-stride and fell hard. Jai saw it happen. She felt it like a knife between her ribs. 2 gone, 10 left. Jai grabbed a flat stone from the sand, the sharpest one she could find, about the size of her palm with a jagged edge. She tore a strip from her tunic and wrapped it around one end to make a grip. It was not much, a cave woman's tool, but it was enough. "Drive it toward me," she shouted. "Push it, force it to turn." Her crew understood. They surged forward from 3 sides, screaming, throwing rocks, waving their arms. The Goreth snarled and twisted, snapping its jaws, but the noise and movement were coming from too many directions. It turned and turned again, and then Jai was there, right beside its flank, close enough to smell the hot, sour stink of its breath. She jumped. She grabbed the base of one of the spines on its back, pulling herself up. The beast bucked and thrashed. She felt her shoulder wrench, felt the skin of her palms tear against the rough bone plates. She held on. She climbed. She drove her knees into the gaps between its armor and pulled herself up until she was on its back, riding the thing like a wild horse. The Goreth screamed. It threw itself sideways, trying to shake her off. Jai hooked her legs around the base of its second arms and found the soft spot right there, just where Suvan had said it would be. Pulsing. Alive. She raised the stone and brought it down. Once, twice, 3 times. Black blood sprayed across her face and arms. The Goreth bucked so hard she felt her teeth crack together. She hit it again, and again. She screamed with every blow, not words, just sound, raw and human and furious. The beast staggered. Its legs buckled. It tried to roar, but the sound came out wet and broken. Jai drove the stone in one final time, burying it deep, and the Goreth collapsed beneath her like a falling building. She hit the sand hard. For a moment she could not breathe. Then hands were pulling her up, Briggs, Tors, Akaffer, and she was standing, swaying, covered in black blood and red sand, her chest heaving and her hands shaking. The Goreth lay still. The arena was silent. A million voices had been screaming moments ago. Now there was nothing. The silence was so complete that Jai could hear the blood dripping from her hands onto the sand. She could hear the wind moving through the open top of the arena. She could hear her own heartbeat, fast and loud, pounding against her broken ribs. The Goreth lay on its side behind her. Its 6 legs were still. Its massive jaw hung open, showing rows of teeth stained with human blood, Kofi's blood, Riena's blood. The stone Jai had used to kill it was still buried in the soft flesh behind its second arms, dark ichor pooling around it like oil. Jai stood in the center of the arena and looked at her crew. 10 of them left. They were bleeding, bruised, shaking. Tors had a deep cut above his eye that was sending blood down the side of his face. Briggs was holding her left arm against her body, dislocated, maybe broken. Dr. Akaffer had already torn strips from her tunic and was pressing them against a wound on Chen's leg where one of the beast's claws had caught him during the fight. They were hurt, they were exhausted, but every single one of them was on their feet. Jai turned and looked up at the observation box high above the arena floor. She could see Vorlzith standing behind the dark glass, his insect-like body perfectly still. Even from this distance, she could feel his shock. It came off him like heat from a fire. He had not expected this. None of them had. She did not shout. She did not raise her fist. She did not make any grand gesture of victory. She simply stood there, chest heaving, blood and black ichor drying on her skin, and stared at the adjudicator with steady eyes. She wanted him to see her face. She wanted him to understand what he was looking at. The cameras were on her. She knew that. Billions of beings across the galaxy were watching this moment through floating broadcast drones that hovered around the arena like metal insects. Every species the Vraxine had ever conquered, every world they had crushed under their rule, every prisoner who had ever been dragged into an arena like this one, they were all watching. Let them watch. In the observation box, Vorlzith turned to his advisors. Jai could not hear what they said. But she could see the rapid movement of their arms, the agitated clicking of their mandibles. Something was wrong up there. The plan had gone sideways and they were scrambling. Then the horn sounded again. Not once, 3 times. 3 long, low blasts that shook the arena walls. Tors grabbed Jai's arm. What does that mean? Jai watched the far gate. It was opening again. Behind it in the darkness she could see movement, something big, 2 somethings. He is sending more, Jai said. The crowd stirred. A ripple of sound moved through the million spectators, not cheering this time but something else. Murmuring. Jai saw Vraxian officials in the lower seats lean toward each other, speaking quickly. She saw other species in the audience, Tesseni, Uruk. Others she did not recognize shift uncomfortably. Something about this was wrong, and even the audience could feel it. Briggs stepped up beside her. 2 more Goraths. Looks like it. We barely survived one. I know. Jai's mind was racing. She looked at her crew, bleeding, limping, running on nothing but adrenaline and will. She looked at the 2 shapes moving in the darkness behind the gate. She felt the exhaustion pulling at her muscles, the pain in her ribs with every breath, the raw burning of her torn hands. But underneath all of that, she felt something else. Something the Vraxian had no word for. It was not courage exactly, and it was not rage. It was the thing that had kept humans going through ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended them 1,000 times over. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to accept that this was where the story ended. She turned to her crew and pulled them close. The broadcast drones circled above, their microphones straining to pick up every word. Jai spoke quietly, so only her people could hear. Look at them up there, she said. Look at Vorlzith. He is breaking the rules of his own game. One beast, that is the tradition. That is what 4,000 years of crucible history says. He is throwing out his own laws because we scared him. She looked each of them in the eye, one by one. They are afraid of us now. That means we have already won. Tors let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. Briggs just nodded, a hard, sharp motion, like she was agreeing to something she had already decided a long time ago. The gate was fully open now. The 2 new Goraths were stepping into the light, their armored bodies catching the white glare of the arena lamps. They were slightly smaller than the first one, but no less terrifying. Their heads swiveled, scanning the arena, finding the 10 small figures standing in the center of the sand. Then something happened that nobody expected. It started in the holding cells beneath the arena. The prisoners down there, Tesseni, Uruk, and a dozen other species waiting for their own turn to die, had been watching the fight on small screens mounted in the walls of their cells. They had watched the humans kill the unkillable beast. They had seen Jai stand over its body and stare down the adjudicator without flinching. Now one of them began to stamp their foot against the metal floor, a slow, steady rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. Another joined, then another, then all of them. The sound was dull and deep, vibrating up through the arena floor like a second heartbeat. Jai felt it in the soles of her bare feet. The sound reached the arena. The audience heard it. Spectators from the conquered species, those who had been forced to attend as a reminder of their place, picked up the rhythm. They stamped their feet against the stone seats. The Tesseni in the upper rows began to sway. The Uruk slammed their heavy fists against the armrests of their seats. Boom, boom, boom. It spread. Section by section, row by row, the sound grew. It was not organized. It was not planned. It was the sound of 1,000,000 beings who had spent their lives under the boot of the Vraxian Dominion, watching 10 battered humans refuse to give up, and something inside them responding to it. Something old and deep and shared across every species that had ever been told it was too weak to fight back. The Vraxian officials were standing now. Guards moved along the aisles, shouting orders, but the stamping only grew louder. The 2 new Goraths in the arena stopped moving. Their heads tilted, confused by the vibration running through the ground beneath them. Vorlzith stood at the glass of his observation box and looked down at the arena. Jai could see him clearly now, the rigid set of his body, the way his 4 arms were pressed flat against his sides. He was not angry. He was something worse. He was uncertain. Jai understood what was happening before he did. This was no longer an execution. It was no longer entertainment. The moment Vorlzith had broken his own rules and sent 2 more beasts to kill the humans, he had made a mistake that could not be undone. He had shown every conquered species watching that the Dominion was not in control. The Dominion was reacting. The Dominion was panicking. And every being in this arena, and every being watching on a screen across the galaxy could see it. A Vraxian officer appeared on the arena floor, flanked by guards. He raised a device that amplified his voice. "The execution is suspended," he announced. "The prisoners will return to their cells." No explanation, no ceremony, just a quick, sharp retreat. The 2 Goreths were driven back through the gate with electric prods. The gate slammed shut. The stamping in the audience slowly faded, replaced by a low hum of voices, confused, excited, frightened. Guards surrounded Jai and her crew and marched them toward the exit tunnel. As they walked across the sand, Jai passed the body of the first Goreth. She stopped, just for a moment, and reached down. The guards tensed but did not stop her. She pulled a single claw from the beast's forelimb. It was curved, black and sharp as a surgical blade. It was the length of her hand. She closed her fingers around it and kept walking. Behind her in the stands, 1,000,000 beings watched the humans disappear into the tunnel. The broadcast drones followed them until the darkness swallowed them whole. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, beings of 100 different species sat in front of their screens and tried to understand what they had just seen. Most of them could not find the words. But they all felt the same thing. A small, dangerous feeling that the Vraxian had spent 4,000 years trying to crush out of every species they had ever conquered. Hoping. The footage spread faster than the Vraxian could contain it. Within 6 hours of the arena broadcast, clips of the fight had been copied, shared, and reposted across every communication network in the galaxy. Vraxian sensors shut down channels as fast as they could, but it was like trying to stop water with open hands. For every feed they killed, 10 more appeared. The most shared clip was only 12 seconds long. It showed Jai standing over the dead Goreth, black blood on her face, her chest heaving, staring up at the observation box with eyes that burned through the screen. Someone had added a simple caption in Galactic Common Script. She did not kneel. It was everywhere. On trade stations, on colony worlds, on refugee ships drifting between systems. Tessani merchants played it on loop in their market stalls. Uruk workers passed it between their communication devices in factory break rooms. Species that had never heard of humans before watched the clip and asked each other the same question: what kind of creature could do that? On 3 colony worlds, the footage sparked something more than conversation. On Vreth Minor, a Tessani farming settlement, workers refused to report to their fields for the first time in 200 years. They gathered in the central square and stood there in silence, doing nothing, saying nothing, but refusing to move. The Vraxian garrison commander did not know what to do. There was no violence to punish, no leader to arrest. Just thousands of quiet, gray-skinned farmers standing with their backs straight, looking at the sky. On the mining moon of Kaldas, Uruk laborers walked out of the deep tunnels and blocked the entrance shafts. When the Vraxian foremen demanded they return to work, the Uruk simply pointed to the screens on the wall where the arena footage was still playing. One of them said, "If the small ones can stand, so can we." On Dalvoris itself, in the lower city beneath the arena, graffiti appeared overnight on the walls of Vraxian government buildings. Crude drawings of a human figure standing over a fallen beast. No words, none were needed. The Vraxian Dominion Council held an emergency session. The council chamber was filled with the sharp clicking of agitated officials arguing over each other. Some demanded that the humans be executed immediately and quietly, without broadcast, to end the spectacle. Others warned that killing them now would only make the situation worse. The humans were already symbols, and dead symbols were more powerful than living ones. Vorelzeth sat in his seat and said nothing. He had not spoken since leaving the arena. One of his intelligence officers presented a report on the species called humans. It was thin. Humanity had only been a presence in galactic affairs for a few decades, and the Vraxine had not considered them important enough to study closely. But what the report contained was troubling. Humans came from a world classified as a Category 7 environment, a death world. Their planet was covered in active volcanoes, shifting tectonic plates, extreme weather, and millions of competing predator species. The fact that they had survived at all was statistically unusual. The fact that they had become the dominant species on such a world was, according to the report, difficult to explain through conventional evolutionary models. The officer highlighted several concerning traits. Humans could regulate their body temperature through sweating, allowing them to chase prey for hours without stopping. They could function through extreme pain by flooding their own nervous systems with chemicals that suppressed fear and increased strength. They formed intense social bonds that made them willing to die for each other. And perhaps most disturbing of all, they had a documented tendency to become more dangerous, not less, when pushed into desperate situations. The report included a word that the Vraxine linguists had struggled to translate. The human word was spite. The closest Vraxine equivalent meant something like causing harm to oneself in order to cause greater harm to an enemy, but even that did not capture it fully. The concept seemed to be deeply embedded in human culture and decision-making. It meant that humans would sometimes choose to fight even when winning was impossible, simply because losing quietly was unacceptable to them. The intelligence officer recommended caution. Far away, on the other side of the galaxy, Earth received the broadcast. The United Terran Confederacy, humanity's governing body for off-world affairs, had been monitoring the situation since the driftwood went missing. Now they had video proof of their citizens being thrown to alien beasts for entertainment. The response was immediate. The Confederacy issued a formal ultimatum to the Vraxine Dominion: return the surviving crew members within 72 hours. The message was polite. The language was diplomatic, but everyone who read it understood what it meant. There would not be a second message. The Vraxine Military Command reviewed the ultimatum and dismissed it. Humanity's navy was small, a fraction of the Dominion's fleet. They had fewer ships, fewer weapons, fewer soldiers. By every measurable standard, they were not a threat. But one Vraxine admiral, an old female named Drethful who had fought in campaigns against 12 different species, looked at the human ultimatum for a long time and said something that made the room uncomfortable. "They are not telling us what they will do if we refuse," she said. "They are telling us that they have already decided. That is not how weak species communicate." Nobody responded. In the cells beneath the arena, Jai sat with her back against the cold wall and held the Goreth claw in her hands. Across from her, Dr. Akafer was stitching up the wound on Chen's leg with thread pulled from their tunics and a bone needle fashioned from a piece of the cell's drainage grate. She worked quietly and carefully, the way she always did. Jai had used the point of the claw to scratch 2 names into the stone wall of the cell: KOFI, RENA. The letters were rough and uneven, but they were there, permanent. She ran her fingers over them and felt the grit of stone dust against her skin. "We are getting out of here," Briggs said from the corner. It was not a question. "Yes," Jai said, "we are." A sound came from the corridor outside, footsteps, but lighter than the heavy tread of Vraxine guards. A figure appeared at the cell door. It was a Vraxine, but smaller than the soldiers, wearing the plain clothing of a government clerk. It spoke quickly, nervously, glancing back down the corridor as if afraid of being seen. "I am with the Reform Council," the Vraxine said. "There are those among us who believe the adjudicator has gone too far. What happened in the arena, it was never supposed to happen this way." "And what do you want?" Jai asked. Your people have ships coming. We know this. We want to help arrange your release before this situation becomes something that cannot be undone. Jai studied the small Vraxine for a long moment. She could see the fear in the way it held its arms tight against its body, the claws retracted. It was taking a risk being here. If the hardliners found out, this creature would end up in the arena itself. Why? Jai asked. The Vraxine was quiet for a moment. Then it said, because I watched you in the arena, and I realized that if you could do that, if your species could face the Gorath with nothing and refuse to die, then perhaps the Dominion is not as unbreakable as we have been told. It left as quickly as it had come, disappearing back down the dark corridor. Jai sat in the silence and turned the Gorath claw over in her hands. The 72 hours passed. At the edge of Vraxine space, 17 Terran warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took up positions along the border. They were not a full battle fleet. They were not enough to fight the entire Dominion and win. But they were there, and they were not moving, and they were broadcasting a single message on every frequency, military, civilian, and diplomatic, in every language the translation systems could handle. The message was 3 words long. It was an old human phrase from a war fought thousands of years ago on Earth, spoken by a general who had been ordered to surrender his weapons. Come and take them. Across the Dominion, on every world where the conquered species had access to communication networks, the message was received and understood. Vorlzith read the translation in his chambers and, for the first time in his long career, felt something cold move through his body. He did not have a word for it. The humans did. They called it fear. The pressure came from everywhere at once, and it came fast. The Terran warships held their position at the border, silent and still, broadcasting their 3-word message on a continuous loop. The colony uprising spread to 4 more worlds. The Reform Council within the Vraxine government leaked documents to the galactic press showing that Vorlzith had violated 6 of his own Dominion's legal codes by ordering additional beasts into the arena after the first was killed. The documents also revealed that the Crucible had been used not just against criminals, but against political prisoners, dissidents, and entire families of species that had resisted Vraxine expansion. The leak was devastating. Species that had tolerated Vraxine rule for centuries, species that had accepted the Crucible as a grim but normal part of life under the Dominion, now saw it for what it truly was. Not justice, not punishment, just cruelty dressed in ceremony. Vorlzith had no good options left, and he knew it. His military commanders told him they could destroy the Terran ships at the border, but doing so would trigger a full war with a species that his own intelligence officers had warned him to treat carefully. His political advisors told him that executing the humans quietly would not work either. The galaxy was watching too closely. Every move he made was being recorded, analyzed, and shared across 1,000 worlds. He chose a path he believed would let him save face. A Vraxine emissary arrived at Jai's cell on the morning of the 4th day. He was tall and formal, wearing the silver markings of a diplomatic officer. He stood on the other side of the bars and delivered his message with the stiff precision of someone reading from a script. The adjudicator has decided, in his wisdom and mercy, to grant the human prisoners their freedom. You will be escorted through the path of concession in the Grand Arena, where you will publicly acknowledge the generosity of the Vraxine Dominion. The ceremony will be broadcast. Jai leaned against the wall and listened. The path of concession requires that freed prisoners walk the central corridor of the arena on their knees, the emissary continued. Heads bowed, hands at your sides. This is the tradition. It symbolizes. No. The word was quiet, but it stopped the emissary mid-sentence. The humans will not kneel, Jai said. We will walk out on our feet standing looking forward, or we will not leave at all. The emissary stared at her. His mandibles clicked rapidly. a sign of agitation that Jai had learned to recognize over the past few days. "This is not a negotiation," he said. "The path of concession is your tradition, not ours." Jai pushed herself off the wall and walked to the bars. She was shorter than the emissary by nearly 3 feet, but she looked up at him with the same steady gaze she had given Vorlzith in the arena. "We killed your beast. We survived your game. We will not crawl through your corridor on our knees so your adjudicator can pretend he is being generous. We walk out standing, or we stay in this cell until my people come through your border and take us home themselves." The emissary left without another word. 6 hours later, he returned. Vorlzith had agreed to the terms. The humans would walk, but the adjudicator had added conditions of his own. The path of concession would be lined with armed Vraxine soldiers in full combat armor, and the arena would be filled with spectators once more. Vorlzith intended to turn the release into a display of Dominion power. The message would be clear. The Vraxine were letting the humans go because they chose to, not because they had to. Jai agreed without hesitation. She understood what Vorlzith was trying to do. She also understood that it would not work. The arena filled for the second time. The same million seats, the same floating lights, the same broadcast drones circling in the air above. But the atmosphere was different. The crowd was quieter. The cheering and screaming that had filled the arena before the Goreth fight was gone. In its place was a low, tense hum, the sound of a million beings holding their breath. The path of concession was a straight corridor that ran from one end of the arena floor to the other, marked by low walls on either side. It was 300 meters long. At the far end, a Terran diplomatic shuttle sat on a landing pad that the Vraxine had reluctantly allowed into the arena complex. On either side of the corridor, Vraxine soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder in black armor, their weapons held across their chests. There were hundreds of them. They stood like statues, faces hidden behind dark visors. The gate opened. Jai stepped out first. She was still wearing the same torn, blood-stained tunic from the arena fight. She had refused the clean clothing the Vraxine had offered. She wanted the galaxy to see what had been done to her. She wanted them to see the dried blood, hers and the Gorath's, the bruises on her arms, the bandage wrapped around her ribs where the beast's claw had caught her. Behind her, her crew followed in a single line, 10 of them, Tors, Briggs, Dr. Akafer Chen, and the others. They were battered and limping. Some of them leaned on each other for support, but they were standing, every single one of them. Jai walked with her shoulders back and her head high. Her bare feet made no sound on the smooth stone floor of the corridor. The Goreth claw hung from a strip of cloth tied around her wrist, black and curved, catching the light with each step. The Vraxine soldiers did not move. They stood at attention as the humans passed, just as they had been ordered. But Jai noticed something as she walked between their ranks. Their heads were turning. Behind those dark visors, they were watching her. She could feel their eyes tracking her as she moved past them, and she could feel something in the air between them, something that their training and their armor could not hide. They could not meet her gaze. These were soldiers who had conquered worlds. They had crushed rebellions and burned cities and stood over the ruins of civilizations. They had never once questioned whether they were the strongest beings in the galaxy. Now a barefoot woman in a torn tunic was walking past them with dried monster blood on her face, and they were the ones looking away. The corridor was long, 300 meters of silence. Jai did not rush. She did not slow down. She walked at a steady, measured pace, and her crew matched her step for step. The broadcast drones floated alongside them, capturing every moment from every angle. Across the galaxy, billions watched. In the stands, the conquered species sat in their seats and watched the humans walk. The Tesseni, the Uruk, the Palish, the Sinvari, all of them. They had come to this arena expecting to watch another execution, another display of Vraxine dominance, another reminder of their own helplessness. Instead, they were watching something they had never seen before. They were watching someone walk out. Not dragged, not crawling, not broken, walking, upright, unashamed, with their heads held high and their eyes looking forward. In a holding cell deep beneath the arena floor, a young Uruk child sat on the lap of her mother and watched the broadcast on the small screen in the wall. She was only 5 years old, too young to understand politics or empires or the history of the Crucible. But she understood what she was seeing. She understood the way the humans moved, the way they carried themselves, the way they looked like they were not afraid. She pointed at the screen and said one word. She said it softly, almost to herself, the way children say things when they are learning a new idea for the first time. Human. Her mother pulled her close and said nothing, but her eyes were wet. Jai reached the end of the corridor. The Terran shuttle was right there, 30 steps away, its ramp down, its lights on, the pilot visible through the cockpit window. Safety, freedom, home. She stopped. Her crew stopped behind her. Jai turned around and looked back the way she had come. She looked at the 300 meters of corridor lined with soldiers who would not look at her. She looked at the million spectators sitting in stunned silence. She looked at the broadcast drones hovering in the air, carrying her image to every corner of the galaxy. She looked up at the observation box where Vorlzith stood behind his dark glass, watching his empire crack along fault lines that had been there for centuries, but had never been tested until now. She did not speak. There was nothing left to say. Everything that needed to be communicated was written in the blood on her tunic, in the claw hanging from her wrist, in the 10 battered humans standing behind her, alive and unbroken. She turned back and walked up the ramp. Her crew followed. The last one in was Tors. He paused at the top of the ramp and looked out at the arena one final time. Then he stepped inside and the ramp closed behind him. The shuttle's engines fired. It rose slowly from the landing pad, the heat from its thrusters sending waves of hot air across the arena floor. It climbed through the open roof of the arena and into the sky of Dalvorus, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a point of light against the clouds. Then it was gone. The arena sat in silence for a long time. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The uprisings that had started on 3 colony worlds spread to 30, then 300. The Reform Council within the Vraxine government grew in power, fueled by public anger and the endless, unstoppable circulation of the arena footage. Vorlzith was removed from his position. Then his successor was removed. The Crucible was abolished, not quietly, not gradually, but in a single, sweeping declaration that was broadcast on the same channels that had once carried its executions. The Vraxine Dominion did not fall all at once. It cracked slowly over the course of a decade, splitting along the same lines of cruelty and fear that had held it together for 4,000 years. In its place, something new began to form, a coalition of free species, bound not by conquest but by choice. Humanity was asked to be a founding member, not because they had the largest fleet or the most powerful weapons, but because of what had happened in the arena. Because of what one woman had done when she was given nothing and expected to die. The Goreth Claw ended up in a museum on the Coalition's capital world. It sat in a glass case at the center of the main hall, with a small plaque beneath it that read, in 12 languages, "She stood." And across 1,000 worlds in 100 languages, the story was told the same way. Parents told it to children. Teachers told it to students. Leaders told it to those who were afraid. The words changed with each telling, shaped by the tongues that spoke them, but the core remained the same. The invaders chose beasts as punishment. They filled their arena with monsters and cameras and a million screaming voices. They expected fear. They expected blood. They expected the small, soft creatures from the death world to break and fall and die like all the others. Then they watched the human walk out.